Welcome back to the Wolverine Confidential, your Michigan sports podcast. I'm Eli Zink, a producer here at MLive.
I'm Aaron McMann, Michigan football beat writer.
And I'm Andrew Kahn, Michigan basketball beat writer.
All right, guys, how was our weekend? We didn't get treated to the long weekend. A lot of people did. I saw Black Panther. It was awesome. And then had a good time with some friends. What did you guys do?
A friend and I were going to go see that, and it was sold out. I was up in Mount Pleasant where I went to school and hung out with a buddy, and we were planning to go see it, and it was sold out, so we couldn't go.
Makes sense. It was worth it. It was awesome. I would recommend for anyone who likes Marvel movies, this one is a step above. It was a lot of fun.
I go to the movie theater like once a year. I don't want to blow it in February.
Yeah, it's a good time to go. You know, it's not warm out. It's gray all the time.
I had family over. You know, my brother and his wife and his two little girls. So
all right,
fun cousin time and
there you go.
Oh yeah.
And now we're back. Now we're back at it, and Michigan basketball is the story right now. They're coming off the win this weekend against Ohio State. Avenging the loss in which they blew a huge lead earlier in the season. They looked good doing it, and a few guys stood out. What were your takeaways from that game, Andrew?
It certainly was a revenge win. I mean, this was the players had no problem talking about that after the game. It was nice to get a win over a rival and nice to get a win over a top 10 team. But more importantly was avenging a loss that they feel should have been a win. They were up 20 points in the first half, as you mentioned. So this one felt good for them, and they did it sort of again with defense. Defense was really impressive. Gave up some offensive rebounds in this game, which was had not been a problem earlier in the year. I think we mentioned that on a previous episode. But they forced a lot more misses. Especially around the basket. Their 2-point defense held up. And I'd like to single out Duncan Robinson in particular because I know, from reading some comments and talking to fans.
He's had a tough year, right?
He gets some heat for his defense in particular when he's not making shots. People wonder what is his value. Well, you saw some of it the last two games. We filmed our last podcast before the Iowa game, which was also a win for Michigan, and Duncan Robinson held up against Tyler Cook, one of the better scorers in the Big Ten. And Sunday he did it against Keita Bates-Diop, who's the front runner for Big Ten Player of the Year. The leading scorer in the conference, maybe Tony Carr of Penn State has passed him over the weekend, but he came into this game as a leading scorer, and Duncan Robinson really held his own. So,
considering the types of teams you can see in the NCAA tournament, and even the Big Ten tournament, you have teams that may not have two big bruisers up front, and if Duncan Robinson can come, guard someone down low and be effective defensively and continue to hit shots,
right.
This could be a different team. This is a team that can make a very serious run.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that they have to guard him on the other end.
Right.
And those big bruisers don't really like to play on the perimeter. And even those who don't fit that mold, still it's a difficult challenge.
Still got to work to defend him, 20, 25 feet out, 30 feet out for Duncan Robinson
Absolutely.
when he's hitting. So another impressive game for Xavier Simpson. He played, a solid 30 minutes. Had an efficient night. What were your thoughts on the guards, and then we can get into a little bit of Andrew Dakich, the traitorous Dakich.
Yeah, it was, Beeline talked about Simpson after the game. I'll be writing about this on MLive, in the coming days, about, sort of molding his plan to his personnel and realizing what Xavier Simpson can do, what he can't do, and sort of maximizing his skill set. Now, yesterday, Sunday, was entertaining, particularly because of Dakich, who had played in the Michigan program for 4 years, ended up at Ohio State, sort of a circuitous route to get there. But the bottom line is he's playing for their arch rival.
And he was a fan favorite. He was known for his bench celebrations and was really a guy that fans liked, and I think was a key part of the team, maybe not on the court for every game, but in practice, and he was an effective guy.
Absolutely. He was a mentor to Xavier Simpson. I mean, you saw it when they sat on the bench. He would always the two would sit next to each other, and Dakich would be explaining to Simpson sort of, what to look for on the court, how he could be effective when he went into the game, and in practice he was someone who knew the offense and taught it to him. So, for the second time this season, they were out on the court together, guarding each other, and it was the Ann Arbor crowd, the Chrysler crowd. They gave him the LeBron back in Cleveland the first time treatment as far as booing him not just when he entered the game, but every time he touched the ball for the entire game. He ended up going 0 for 3. He missed a few good chances at the hoop.
Would that get in the guy's head? I mean, it's got to.
Yeah, I mean, there was one play where, you know, he sort of got trapped between the half-court line and the sideline, and Mo Wagner and Simpson, and he had to call timeout, and Wagner's clapping in his face, and, you know, Dockett just kind of smiles and walks off.
And you had to know that was coming, though, right? You think? I mean, do you think before the game you got to mentally prepare yourself? Like, I'm gonna hear it from the audience.
Yeah, I mean, another writer asked me what I thought the reception would be, and I mean, after the fact, it's like, yeah, I guess that was kind of obvious that was going to be. You know, it's not like a professional player.
You don't go to Ohio State from Michigan, come back to Michigan, and expect a lot of love.
No.
That's the nature of the rivalry.
But yeah, another good game for Simpson. There's, you know, they're still figuring out everything that, you know, he can do, and you know, ball screen offense is still. Beilein talked about the geometry of it and figuring out all the angles, so that's still a work in progress. But yeah, a very impressive game for him.
So Simpson solidified himself as the point guard that's going to lead this team. That's clearly a positive for Michigan as they head into the tournament season. I think for a number of weeks he's really, or even, you know, probably a couple months at this point, has held that spot. Now, coming off the bench, of course, you have some depth at point guard, but then you have Jordan Poole, who has never seen a shot he didn't want to take. And he really brings a ton of energy. I mean, he's a high volume scorer. I know Beilein has talked about he's a little off balance sometimes, but what will he bring to this team as we go forward? And he keeps seeing, you know, he had 19 minutes against Ohio State, 15 points in 19 minutes. Sometimes he'll fall off, though. If he's not hitting, he might only see the court for 8 minutes. You know?
Right.
Can we realistically expect him to be a game changer?
He was yesterday. He gave them the spark that they needed. The offense was it was a grinded out game early on, and he came in, and he's the ultimate sort of, you know, no, yes kind of shooter, you know, where you see him getting ready to take a shot, and it doesn't look like it's necessarily a good one, and then it goes in, and you're like, I'll take those 3 points. He's someone who can create his own shot when there seems like there's nothing there, and that's a valuable asset in basketball for sure at the college level.
You need guys that can create their own shot, and even at the NBA level, and I know growing up, playing and at the high school level, any guy that can create their own shot is so important to a team when you're, you know, how many stretches have we seen this year Michigan go through, you know, when they're facing a zone or, you know, if they're facing a really strong defensive team and guys just can't get a shot off. And of course, Abdur-Rahman is one of those guys. But to be able to have a spark plug off the bench, I think is going to be a serious asset for this team going forward, not just this year, but in the years to come. I think fans and John Beilein as well should be especially excited for Jordan Poole.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about rankings. Michigan is 17th in the poll. In the AP poll that just came out today. Ohio State still ranked ahead of them. What are your thoughts on how this team compares to the rest of the country? We're talking big picture now as we go forward.
You know, I think right now Nebraska lost on Sunday, so now they have the same number of losses as Michigan in the Big Ten. They each have 2 games left. Michigan's are both on the road at Penn State Wednesday and then at Maryland over the weekend. Nebraska gets Indiana and Penn State both at home. I see a lot of, you know, fans talking about Michigan trying to get into that 4 spot and get the double bye in the Big Ten tournament. I think we've talked about it on here before. I don't think it's that important. I think Michigan getting its wins to be, you know, have the best resume it can is important. But if it ends up tied with Nebraska and Nebraska has that head-to-head and gets that 4 seed and Michigan gets the 5, I don't think that's a big deal. I think it's about, you know, who you end up getting matched up with, and there's still a lot to be determined with how that shakes out with some of the lower seeds. So, again, I don't see that as the, you know, some sort of critical blow for them. Nationally, yeah, they're at 17, they're climbing. I think that makes sense. I think voters are starting to realize that this team is playing really well right now.
In Joe Lenardi's bracketology, Michigan was sitting at 5th, I believe, in the Midwest.
5 seed, yeah.
So that's interesting. I don't know that I would have predicted that at the beginning of the season after the first few games. I know you were pretty solid in that. This team will shape up. They have a good squad. I think a lot of fans thought, oh, it might be a rough year. And then suddenly, you know, a 5 seed. That's not just, you know, that's a team to be reckoned with. So going forward, I mean, I think that the Big Ten tournament could lead to possibly an even higher seed if they make a crazy run, but is this probably where Michigan's going to sit going into?
Yeah, I mean, I saw, you know, CBS has them as a 7. 5 is one of the better seeds that I've seen around in various brackets. But I don't want to say that's necessarily the ceiling. You know, these 2 next games would be good wins, and then, yeah, you make run in the Big Ten tournament. Now you're piling up even more impressive wins, these quadrant 1 wins, as the selection committee will be looking at. So it's hard to say exactly what the ceiling would be. I guess if I had to guess right now, I'd probably split the difference and say maybe a 6.
Yeah.
But again, it is more matchup based once you see the actual NCAA tournament draw.
Right. Well, anything else we can add to the future of Michigan basketball? I think, you know, this is a season that's going to be remembered, and even though last year was the Big Ten championship, is there any chance this team could possibly go even further than last year's team in your eyes?
I mean, you know, you can't do any better in the tournament, obviously, the conference tournament, and then in the NCAA tournament, you know, they were a shot away from the Elite 8. Geez, it's again, you got to kind of wait. I think this is a team that will be at this point, you know, favored, get a favorable seed to be favored in that first game. Then those second games usually are, you know, on the quick turnaround. You know, Michigan has historically done pretty well in those games, but they're kind of toss-ups. And then, you know, after that, now you're playing another elite team.
Right.
So I think they're right there. They're getting there. They're doing things differently. You know, they don't have the necessarily offensive punch, but they're, you know,
defense, right?
Defensively is
with the John Beilein team, we just haven't seen defense as the, you know, strongest tool in their belt. And while they still are an efficient offense, I mean, it's really impressive to see that this team can, you know, make the stops that they need to win games, where before it was they need to hit the shots to win games.
Absolutely. It's almost, it's not surprising, but it's certainly different to hear, you know, Chris Holtmann, an Ohio State head coach, come in and say how they, you know, they were physical, they extended the pressure on our guards, you know, they pushed us out, they made us uncomfortable, and have Michigan, you know, win a game with its defense. You ask the players, the coaches, you know, where do you think there's improvement for this team still? And it's offense. The answer is offense. You know, oh, we can be more efficient from the foul line for sure. We can, you know, be better in the pick and roll, better ball movement, things like that. It's like, you know, in a way, it's kind of refreshing.
It's a good sign too, you know.
Yeah.
So John Beilein continues his remarkable run at Michigan, which is, of course, a basketball program. Let's talk about the secondary sport at the University of Michigan, football. Jim Harbaugh was sitting courtside and maybe had a few notes for his program going forward as he does a self-audit. Clearly some changes are being made with the Jim McElwain hire. Let's talk about that a little bit. Hired as the wide receivers coach, as you pointed out in an article earlier this week, with a chance to become a coordinator. What does that even mean?
It's basically, it sounds like the same deal that Dan Enos got, the former wide receivers coach. He was here all of 6 weeks, went on to Alabama, where he's the quarterback's coach and associate, I think, head coach. So he got an elevated title. But it's basically Harbaugh bringing McElwain on staff. In a position right now as wide receivers coach, but it leaves things are open. Guys can move. Job titles could be taken away from folks. This is what I'm most interested in right now, because we haven't heard where the dominoes are going to fall here. You've got Tim Drevno as offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. You got Pep Hamilton, who's obviously the passing game coordinator and had a hand in helping call the offense last year. This is where things get muddy. You know, last year Michigan's offense was reliant on 3 guys to call plays. It was Drevno, it was Harbaugh, and Pep Hamilton. No, they never really diverged how the process went, who called what, when, so we don't really know all the answers there. Harbaugh did say he had final say on play calls, but I would gather to say that Harbaugh and his coaching staff have reassessed that, have looked at it and realized, you know, there are probably too many cooks in the kitchen, and this is, you know, a phrase that's been thrown around often now. There were just too many guys, you know, with their hands in the playbook. I think that's where you saw Michigan's offense break down and struggle last year, to some degree. And so I think bringing McElwain on, he has obviously offensive coordinating experience. He did it at Alabama, and they were very successful. He's done it before. He has significant head coaching experience. So I don't think wide receivers coach is where McElwain is going to stop. Now, I don't know if that's going to mean this year. I don't know. Maybe it changes next year. We haven't gotten our hands on the contract, so I don't know how many years he signed with. I don't know what the details are right now. Obviously, we always like to say the devil's in the details. But I'm willing to venture this is the same situation as Dan Enos. So whether or not Pep Hamilton's name has come up for NFL jobs here in the last month or so, he hasn't gone anywhere. Drevno is still under contract, and there's no sign of him leaving. But I would gather to venture here that other changes are going to happen. We don't know yet at this point.
So as a wide receivers coach, clearly there were so many issues with the offense last year. A lot of people focus on the offensive line, but we talked about this during the football season during another Michigan football show, and we said sometimes actually that offensive line did their job, and a big reason that O'Korn or whoever was playing quarterback, it was usually O'Korn, right?
Yeah.
The reason he was holding on to the ball was because guys just weren't getting open. You pointed that out. You're up in the press box. You have a better view than a lot of us watching on TV. And you saw that, after Black went down with the injury, Peoples-Jones had a tough time getting open. Other guys were just not beating their man. Is McElwain and having a proper wide receivers coach going to make a huge difference in that, or is that just going to be players developing and that's the reality of it?
I think it's a combination of all of that. I think having a dedicated coach helps because it's someone you can talk, you can lean on, you can deal with on a daily basis. And that's not to say the receivers weren't working with Pep Hamilton on a regular basis, because that's true. But Pep had so many other responsibilities to work with. He's dealing with a quarterback situation which was constantly in flux. Guys were constantly injured or banged up. He had to try and move Brandon Peters along. So there was a lot going on there. So if you bring in a wide receivers coach that can basically focus in on a group of guys, he can help develop, he can work with one-on-one at times, I think helps the development. Now some of these guys, if Tariq Black comes back healthy and playing like he did last year, I think it's going to help. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is poised for a big year. He looked better as the year went on. You can tell he was getting more comfortable, more familiar with the playbook, and that's half the battle with some of these young guys. This is their first year in college. They're almost working with, and a lot of them mention this, but Michigan's playbook is almost like an NFL playbook. I mean, it's very complicated. It's very specific in what they want. So when things break down or don't go as planned, then the offense struggles. So I think you saw that at times last year. The offensive line struggled at times, obviously. The running backs had their moments. But at the same token, the receivers didn't always do their job either. So I think with a new receivers coach coming in and with another year to develop with some of these, keep in mind you got Nico Collins, Oliver Martin, guys who didn't get a ton of playing time or play at all last year. They're going to look to take another step, and you've got a couple of other guys too. Kakoa Crawford, another guy Michigan used at times last year. Eddie McDoom's another name. So you've got some younger guys, I think, who would benefit greatly from a dedicated coach. I think that's what McElwain does. I wrote this earlier today on MLive. It basically checked off a need for Michigan. Now whether McElwain's duties expand or not remains to be seen, and I'm curious to see. That's kind of the story to be had.
Well. But I'll be in Grand Rapids this week doing a little project out there, and then gone next weekend.
You want to plug it for the listeners?
That. Well, so.
Are we spoiling something?
Well, we got to keep that under wraps, okay, but once that's all done, we'll talk about it here next week. Okay. Thanks for joining us again on the Wolverine Confidential, your Michigan sports podcast. I'm Eli Zink.
I'm Aaron McMann.
I'm Andrew Kahn.
And we'll see you next week. I will not be here in my stead. You'll find out. We'll see you next week.
Nice.
Wow.
So I think we have Bryn.
Drops a bomb on us at the end. I'll have to look back to look at my face when you say that. Genuine.
Yeah, I talked to Bryn. I should have mentioned that to you guys earlier.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was going to bring up to you guys too. Hopefully it's not a big deal. Not next week, but the following week.
Right.
So it'd be the 6th.
Yeah.
I will be in Los Angeles that day.
Yeah, and I will be.
So we'll probably.
I'm thinking Tuesday.
Move the day. Yeah.
I will be.
I'm gonna go.
Wait, the 5th, you mean?
Yeah, the 5th.
Yeah, I'll be coming back from the
Perfect.
Big Ten.
So it worked out. Cool.
Yeah, I don't land until 2:30.
Okay, who we brought on, it turns out to be McElwain, is going to have a hand in the offense. I wrote this earlier today. I'm curious to see if he ends up being another cook in the kitchen, or it's going to be Harbaugh and McElwain. It's the two guys are very interesting. They're both in terms of Harbaugh and McElwain. They're both similar age. They both kind of run the similar type offenses, pro style. They like a pocket quarterback. I'm curious to see the dichotomy of what happens here. Obviously, Drevno and Harbaugh have always been so close. And Drevno's been mainly
which is an issue to some people.
It is, yeah, and that's
apparently could be a.
And that's a valid concern. It's something that's maybe Harbaugh's vision is clouded, and it's possible. But you keep in mind you've got Drevno under contract for another 3 years and $1 million a pop. You've got Pep Hamilton under contract for $1 million for the next 2 years. So you've got guys they're under contract. You can't necessarily buy them out. So I'm waiting to see what happens. It's going to be fascinating to see if it ends up being McElwain wholly in charge of the offense, or if he's just in charge of the receivers.
Well, I think we'll have to wait to find out, but spring practice, again, is going to tell us a lot, and it's creeping up on us, so I'm very curious to see how those chips fall. I would imagine this self-audit that's occurring might be resolved by then, or is this going to stretch throughout the whole summer?
No, it sounds like Harbaugh's staff is pretty much in place. We asked him, I think it was 2 weeks ago at the signing day press conference, whether or not he anticipated any more departures. He said no. I don't know if he's telling the truth or not. Obviously you got to be confident about the staff you have in place. If anybody leaves, I think Pep Hamilton would be the guy, just because he's got so much NFL experience.
So many rumors with him.
Yeah.
His name popping up for the Raiders job and other places in NFL circles. But we will certainly find that out soon. Let's move on. We talked about how the offensive line struggled, and a solution may be imminent in Calvin Anderson, who has trimmed his list of 5
to 4.
To 4.
I love
recruiting. The suspense is amazing.
It should have been its own podcast.
I know, right?
We have the own little mini tournament for Calvin Anderson, and we are placing our bets. No, we're not. We do not bet or gamble here.
So yeah, it's down to 4. Obviously, Michigan and Texas. He stated this already. Michigan and Texas. I think he called it his top tier teams or top tier schools at this point.
So he's got tiers.
Yes.
He's trimming the list one at a time.
Below that, apparently,
I love his approach.
Yes, is Auburn and Oklahoma. I don't know if they're in the same tier or they're separate tiers. I don't know. So it sounds like
Do you have a name for the tiers?
As far as I know, no. But then again, I don't.
Does he have a website?
No, he doesn't have one of those. But anyway, TCU is out as far as we know. It's down to 4. He visited Oklahoma, which has kind of come in here last minute as a possible destination. He visited them over the weekend. So he's taken official visits to all 4 schools at this point. He's visited with the coaches. He's familiar, I think, with the programs and what they want out of him, what they expect out of him. Now it's decision time. He set an internal decision for March 25th, which is the same day as his 22nd birthday. I'd anticipate it happening before then. By that point, most programs will start spring practice. Now, that's not to say he's not going to roll and be ready for spring, but I think he wants to have this figured out, and he wants to let these teams know what's going on. By the time spring practice does roll around, because then, say he does decide on Michigan. Michigan's basically, they're going to focus on their guys in spring practice at other positions, because I would assume, and this is me speculating, but when most guys transfer as grad students and they're 3-year starters, they're going to get a good shot to play.
Right.
So if he decides on Michigan, I think Michigan has the left tackle situation figured out, which is a desperate need going into the year.
And he'd get a free trip to where are they going this year?
Yeah, Paris and Normandy. So.
Yeah, well, ideally, I'll be able to tag along. Not sure why that would be the case, and I don't expect it to happen, but I'll just show up. It's fine.
There you go.
So we talk about Calvin Anderson. He's clearly a serious talent, even though he's coming from a smaller program. He's a guy that would help, and I'm sure expects to play immediately.
Yeah, 3 starter. He was honorable mention All Conference USA, so I think he'd fit in. I'm curious to see how he would adapt to the Big Ten, size and speed of the Big Ten, because obviously the Big Ten and Conference USA are different. I put Conference USA more on the pedestal than MAC. Maybe a little bit better. But he's obviously been healthy. He's obviously played well. He's a consistent starter. He's got the body. I think he'd fit in fine.
So. We didn't get to touch on this in our last 2 podcasts because we've had a lot of content, but let's briefly touch on Chris Partridge. He had a promotion and expanded role in recruiting. He's now going to be the safeties and special teams coach. How important is that move? We talk about solidifying the staff, and Chris Partridge is a hot commodity, sought after by Alabama, spurned Alabama to stay at Michigan. Harbaugh was his come-up, but how long can they hold on to this guy who's extremely talented and desired?
Well, he signed a new 2-year contract last month. His contract, I think, technically expired. He had become technically a free agent in the college football world, which is crazy to think about. He had reportedly Alabama after him. I'm sure there were some other schools that reached out. He's only been in the college realm for a couple of years now, but he's made his mark. Like you mentioned, he was National Recruiter of the Year in 2016 and 17 by Scout and Rivals. He's well 24/7, excuse me. So he's well liked. He's done a good job of bringing talent to Michigan. He's been here 2 years now, and I've already got a list of guys he's brought in in the recruiting class. Cam McGrone, Mustafa Muhammad, both 4-star guys. McGrone is borderline 5. But then you've got guys already in the team: Aubrey Solomon, Rashawn Gary, Kareem Walker, Michael Dwumfor. Those names you all recognize. Now, some have played more than others, obviously, at this point. But they're, I think, guys that could have an impact, and some of which, in the interest, respects of Gary, he's had an immediate impact. Those are guys that Partridge had a huge hand in bringing here. He was before he came to Michigan, before he came to the college ranks, he was a highly respected high school coach in New Jersey. He's got Northeast ties for recruiting. He's helped Michigan tap that New Jersey pipeline. He's helping in the South now as well. He's well liked. He's done a good job, and Harbaugh basically had no choice to keep him. I mean, he gave him a huge pay bump. He's making $500,000 a year now. He's going to have more of a hand in recruiting. He's a guy that Michigan desperately needed to have, and it's a good thing that they brought him back.
That's a serious win for the program, keeping things intact both in recruiting and from a coaching standpoint. The linebackers did a great job last year. He clearly knows what he's doing on both fronts. Necessary guy to keep on board. So that's all we have for this week. Do you guys have any big plans coming up for the week?
Nothing. Celebrating President's Day for the rest of the day.
Indeed. I will be doing so as well. But I will be in Grand Rapids this week doing a little project out there, and then gone next weekend.
You want to plug it for the listeners?
That. Well, so...
Are we spoiling something?
Well, we got to keep that under wraps,
okay,
but
okay.
Once that's all done, we'll talk about it here next week.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us again on the Wolverine Confidential, your Michigan sports podcast. I'm Eli Zink.
I'm Aaron McMann.
I'm Andrew Kahn.
And we'll see you next week. I will not be here in my stead. You'll find out.